This video has been sponsored by Squarespace. The past couple of weeks, I've really been neglecting my Hyundai i30N. The last time you guys seen it, we did some work on the rear end by replacing the rear bumper with a brand new skin from Hyundai and also pulling out the rear quarter to get that back into shape. So now the back end of the car is ready for paint, but the front end is a long way off. Because apart from repairing the suspension damage, which we've already done, the front end of the car I have not touched one bit. It needs a new bonnet, it needs a new wing, it needs a new headlights, it needs a new rad pack and slam panel. But before any of that, we've got to replace these bits here because these bits got a little bit crumpled in the crash. So I've nipped down to my local screw fix and picked up a cheap little mini belt sander, and on top of that I've also borrowed this drill bit which is specific for taking out spot welds. And I've also got the new pieces here which I'm going to replace those ones with, and you can see around the edge these are all the spot welds which I need to remove, and then once those are off I'll be able to remove those tin bits from that section which I've got there and transfer them over to my car, which will then give me the perfect base to start building the car back up. Let's do this. So this is a first for me. I've never had to do any real structural work on a car before, and I've especially never had to do drilling out spot welds and re-welding panels on, so bear with me here a little bit. So I started off by drilling pilot holes and then going in with the spot weld drill bit until I got all the way through the weld. Okay, so there we have it. The first bracket is now removed. It did actually turn out that the drill bit that I borrowed originally is actually really blunt, so I wasn't really making great progress. I nipped out, got a new drill bit, and it cut through it like a hot knife through butter. So there's one part off. I've kind of got the knack for doing it now, I think. We can start on with the rest of it now. The outer wing bracket had been removed. Now it was time for this internal kind of chassis brace part. There was a lot of welds here, probably about 50 maybe in total, so it did take quite a while to get through them all. But after a couple of hours, I did start getting there and it did become loose until I could wiggle it off that cut of chassis leg which I had. Let me tell you, that was a lot harder than I thought it was going to be, and it took a lot longer than I thought it was going to as well, and it's definitely not the cleanest work I've ever done, but it will do the job, and that is now both the brackets I needed removed from the cut of the chassis leg which I bought. So as you can see here, I've got the new wing bracket which is going to mount something like that. So you can see this one. Well, it probably was savable, to be honest with you. You guys are probably right, but I've already got this bit now. And I've also got this piece here, which is going to mount just here. Hopefully taking the ones that I don't need off the car is going to be at least a little bit easier. Spoiler alert, it really wasn't, but I had to access them, so the thing that I had to do first was remove all of the stuff that was going to get in the way. So that's the fuse box, the air box, and the battery and battery tray. The great thing with this car is it only seems to have two sorts of fittings, 10mm or 12mm, so you only really need two tools to do, as far as I can tell, pretty much everything on this car. Once those were out the way, I then cut off the parts that I didn't need to make access to the spot welds a little bit easier, and then started drilling away at those too. And if I'm being real, I did get a little bit tired of it here, so I may have called in some help. But after hours and hours of drilling and chiseling, eventually we started to make some progress, and this inner brace did start to come off the car. To make removing it that little bit easier, we cut a section of this out, obviously because we don't need it, and that means that we could remove it in halves instead. And finally, we got them off the car, so now I could start cleaning up the new sections using my new little finger belt sander, just to make sure that this surface was going to be as clean as possible and weld to the chassis leg as nicely as it can. So then it was time to transfer that onto the car itself by welding it into place, or more specifically, spot welding it. So there we have the new pieces welded on, and it is looking pretty much as factory apart from the paint side of things. And there is one other thing missing, which is a bit of seam sealer which runs across here at the top, as can be seen on this side here. It runs up to this edge, so I'm now going to try and recreate that on this side. It's probably not that important, but I just want it to look the part. Just using some polyurethane sealer, I'll run it down that seam and then go over it a couple of times to try and recreate the factory look. It's not 100%, but it will definitely do the job, and once it's painted over, I don't think you'll even notice it. So the final step here is getting this colour coded to the rest of the car. So I've masked off the car roughly, but it's not too important because, well, a lot of the car is either being painted or scrapped anyway. So I've just used my favourite pink towel to cover off some of it there. The bonnet doesn't matter, just covered off the engine bay quickly. I'm going to spray with real low pressure because, well, the finish on here, I'm just going to try and match this. It's definitely not as good as like the outer body of the car, so I'm just going to aim to try and get it close to that. And the first step to doing that is etch priming all of the bare metal parts to make sure that the paint is going to stick to those properly. And once I'm happy that that's done and dry, we can then swap over to our base coat. The colour for this is called Performance Blue. So I went down to my local paint suppliers and got a litre of that and sprayed over with a super low pressure, 1 to minimise overspray, but 2 to make a bad finish the same as on the other side of the engine bay. And I'm so happy with the paint job that I've done on this, I'd even consider opening my own body shop. And the only way I could do that is using a website that I built with Squarespace. Squarespace is the all-in-one tool to help you build and run your own website. They make designing a state-of-the-art website so easy with hundreds of templates to pick from. You can drag and drop your own text and images to customize your website to exactly how you want it. And even better than that, you can integrate videos and all sorts of other stuff to make your website stand out from the crowd. Now, the thing that I love about Squarespace is it leaves you in control, so you can make minor adjustments or tweaks to your website as and when you want for no additional charge. Unbelievable, I know, but there's so much more. Squarespace also has a bunch of great tools to help you get the most out of your site too. So that includes things like online analytics, marketing, search engine optimization, and even e-commerce. So to start getting the most out of your business, go to Squarespace today and use discount code ChrisSlix, and it's going to save you 10% off your first website or domain name. So thank you, Squarespace, for sponsoring this video. Let's get back to work on this Hyundai. Now we have those structural pieces sorted, the car can start going back together, and we can start with the engine bay itself and all the bits that we had to take out in order to repair that damage. The first thing to go back in is the fuse box, which is held in with 3 10mm, 1 on the strut tower and then 2 on that piece that we've replaced. I feel like having those structural parts done is a weight off my shoulders, and it's definitely the much better way of doing it than trying to pull them back into shape, because once they're bent like that, they're never going to be quite the same. Now we have the battery tray back in place and also the ECU bolted in too, so now it's just to plug that in and then we can refit the battery. And then finally the airbox. Well, the airbox from the car was actually damaged in the crash, so won't be going back on. So just for a temporary measure, we're going to borrow this ram air filter which came off Matt's Lambo until we get something else sorted. So now that structural piece on the car is now sorted and it is back together, we can start looking at reassembling the car, but we all know I'm a fan of the modification here or there. So the guys at RPM Performance have kindly sent us out these pair of bloody boomerangs, mate.
What do you think I'm going to say to you?
No.
Correct. Goodbye.
I'm sorry, that was awful, but these are wishbone strengthening plates, so essentially well, the clue's in the name, they strengthen the wishbones, but they stop things flexing. Because these are the standard i30 wishbones, these add a bit more rigidity to them, and if you do end up pushing the car a bit harder, these are going to take it. Let's get it didgeridoo. Okay, so this is the underside of the wishbone right now, and you can see right here we've got a bolt and 2 nuts for the ball joint, and then there's 4 holes, 1, 2, 3, 4. And these are the locating points for those wishbone strengthening plates. So we're going to start by taking these off and then put it on and back on with these, and then we can use the bolts and nuts which come supplied to bolt it into here. I hope you guys can see that. So the first step to that, if I didn't explain it very well in the first place, is undoing the ball joint at the bottom. So that was 3 17mm. Now I can pop those back in once that strengthening plate was in place. As you can see, this is a really easy install. After those 3 are back in for the ball joint, there's then just 4 bolts to pop in, which comes supplied with the kit. These are 19mm, they go through the holes from the factory wishbone and then into the strengthening plate. You tighten those up and away you go. So I just wanted to say a massive thank you to the guys at RPM Performance for shipping out those wishbone strengthening plates. They have also sent us some other bits, but we're going to come back to them at a later date. We've got some more to do on the repair side of things for now. So I guess this is the next stage in the rebuild part, because now I'm ready on the wing side at least to put a new body panel on, but there's no point me doing that until I've got this mess sorted. Now I could go to the main dealer or look online for the individual parts to replace and strip it down and see exactly what I need and what I don't, and you know, see if I can get away with some bits and see which bits I definitely can't get away with. But I just don't really see the point in doing that when I can just go and buy this. This is a complete new rad pack and slam panel in one. So that includes the actual structure itself, it includes the fan on the back, which this alone is 450 quid from the main dealer. It includes a bunch of hoses, it includes the horns, which are a common failure point on these cars, it includes the intercooler, the aircon rad and the radiator. Now although the crash bar on my car is a little scuffed up, I'm happy to say that that is reusable, along with this lower piece down here too. So once I've got those stripped off, it should be pretty easy to take the old rad pack off the car, pop this new one on, and we know that everything is okay then. So the first thing to remove is the headlight. This is just held in with 3 bolts and some clips, so that comes off really easily. And then we can start looking at the crash bar and slam panel. So the way that this is held on is with 2 12mm which hold the crash bar to the slam panel, and then 4 12mm which go through the crash bar and the slam panel into the chassis leg. And then quickly inside the wheel arch there's a brake cooling vent which we can remove with 4 clips. And a 10mm at the bottom of the wing which holds the slam panel to the wing and that chassis bracket which we'd already replaced on the other side. And now all of that's loose from the car, we can start removing some of the hoses. So we've got a top and bottom radiator hose to remove. And also the aircon hoses to remove. Now these are held in with 2 10mm, but do be careful, if your aircon system is still pressurised, this will release gas which is really toxic. Obviously mine has a big hole in it, so that has already been depressurised. And then the final bit before we can get this off is the bonnet latch cable. Right, I've made a bit of a balls up here because I'm sort of trapped until I take this lower radiator hose off, and well, it's definitely still going to have some water in it, so I'm probably going to get soaked. So there is 3 hoses left at the bottom of the rad pack. So we've got the intercooler, so there's 1 in and out for that, and also the bottom radiator hose. And after I've got those jubilees undone, the intercooler hoses can come off, and also the final clamp for that lower radiator hose. So now the rad pack is off the car. There is the rad pack and slam panel off the car, and I'm actually feeling really lucky. Well, I'm feeling lucky and grateful. Lucky because, well, the car was millimetres from being in a much worse state. This is a plastic inlet manifold here. You've got the throttle body here with a plastic casing on the end. You've also got all of these pipes and everything like that are just here, and the rad pack got pushed back and it was touching these areas, so if the collision was any worse, it would have damaged a whole lot more. And also as well, I'm very grateful that the crash can, you know, where the crash bar attaches to isn't damaged as well, because just centimetres above that, maybe 1 or 2, that is where most of the damage happened to the car. So if that was an inch or 2 lower, this could have quite easily been a category B and never gone back on the road. But I think we got away pretty lightly. One other thing I want to say as well is this car is actually really, really nice to work on, so I'd fully recommend it. If you want to get into spannering and working on your own car, an i30N seems like a pretty good choice. Now, the only rubbish bit that I've spotted so far is the wiring that we've got just here, which comes straight out of the fuse box. And the end of these two have completely been ripped off, and I have no idea what they're for, so that could cause us a problem. Well, I'm keeping my fingers crossed that Hyundai are going to sell the plugs so I can repair those, because without it, I mean, it goes right into this fuse box loom, and that's just going to be a nightmare. So now we've established that I've got away pretty lightly, really, we can get the new one on. Now this way round it should be a doddle, so we've just got to get the whole new rad pack into place, get a couple of bolts in to hold it in, and then we can start reconnecting all of the hoses. And once they're on, I can then put the crash bar in place with the two 10mm which hold it to the rad pack, and then we can put the 12mm in which bolt that and the slam panel into the chassis leg. Okay, rad pack is now done, slam panels all bolted on, and now it's time to see whether the bonnet will close. Now, I made this mistake on the Jag and got it stuck down, and it was so much work to try and get it back open again, so I'm going to do it before I put the front bumper on, and that way I can adjust the mechanism, if it needs it, to suit the bonnet, which doesn't fit anyway because the hinges are bent. Logic. Anyway, let's try it. I mean, it looks good. I mean, you can't argue with that. That was precision, I think. So the final step is getting some coolant in the car, and there's a bit of a debate online, I think, about what coolant you're actually supposed to use in the i30N, and I think the reason behind that is because they come from Korea with yellow coolant in, which I don't think we use in the UK, and then it gets taken out, and then that gets replaced, I think, with blue or green, and then that mixes with the yellow coolant which is left in the system and makes this real bright kind of luminous green coolant which you see in the header tank. And well, I haven't got that, and the local parts place is shut, and what I have got is some G11 coolant here, which I think online they say is okay for these, but it's definitely better to have some coolant in than none, so I'm just going to put this in. So now, just to pop back on the wheels and get the car back on the floor and start her up and enjoy myself a nice cup of coffee while the coolant system bleeds. Whilst we're waiting for that, let's just take a little throwback to when I first got this car and the first video I did on it. There was a few people laughing at me in the comments because I said the Apple CarPlay didn't work. Well, apparently it does work, but it only works with a USB cable, which, well, that's just not in this decade, is it? So the guys at One Car Stereo have sent me this. Now, what this should enable us to do is use Apple CarPlay wirelessly in a car where it only allows a wide connection. So it comes with this little box here, which I'm going to place just there, and also a couple of cables as well. So this end will go into the car just there, and this end goes into the box just there. And straight away, what's this we have here? So all we do on the phone is go for this here, AutoKit T-Box pair, and then as quickly as that, what do we know? We have Apple CarPlay wirelessly in the i30N. Now I'm going to leave a link for these in the description, so go and grab yourself one. Remember, it only works on cars with a wired CarPlay connection where you want to make it wireless, so just bear that in mind and make sure your car's compatible before you buy it. So there we have the coolant system fully bled up now, and the full rad pack on the front is all working perfectly apart from the aircon, which obviously has to be re-gassed at some point. But progress is good. I feel like we're flying through the i30N, but we still have more to go on it because we're still missing some obvious bits on the front end of the i30N, but they're going to have to wait until next time. So for now, make sure you subscribe to the channel, like this video, and I'll catch you next time.